welcome back. Today we're doing another deck tech video. That's right, we're back to our original roots for this channel, deck techs. Now today we're visiting Karazikar the Eye Tyrant. This is what appears to be, from YouTube metrics, my most popular commander that I've been playing over these past few months. And my channel is very different from most other channels when it comes to talking about deck techs. I personally don't feel it's appropriate to express or share opinions on cards unless I have extensively played them. And I have video footage showing me extensively playing this card for months, so I feel comfortable making and showing you a deck tech. And it's always been like that, all the way back from like 2011 in my older videos. I only shared a deck after I had spent many games with that deck. Now, this deck, it has, not only is it my most popular deck, I do the weird nerdy thing where I record and monitor my win ratios. And I know I'm stabbing myself in the foot by saying this, but this deck has a higher than normal win rate. And now, it's not a very degenerate deck, it's not full of very broken cards or any combos. It's just how the deck functions, and I will try to tailor this deck tech into not just showing the cards and the interactions, but how to create elegant verbiage to use while you're playing a deck like this that hopefully can help give you a bit of an edge in some scenarios where you may not be actually in any position to win. So what this is and why I'm saying that, this is a group hug deck, a Rakdos group hug deck, not group slug. One of my oldest videos is a Mogus, the God of Slaughter deck, which was called a Punisher deck, a fun Punisher deck. And that's kind of what a group slug deck is, where there's multiple effects that punish and hurt all the opponents at once. This deck doesn't do this. This is a genuine group hug deck. And once you start playing the cards in this deck, and you tell your opponents that you're group hug, and they see the cards you're playing, they believe you, because that's what it is. And the most disarming part of this entire thing, those familiar with group hug cards are looking for white and green as the opponent, so they can cast the spell where they gain 7 life, and then in a few turns they just win the game. That's the expected win cons from group hug. We don't have those colors, so that's what catches people off guard. They see a genuine group hug deck, but they don't know how this deck is going to win. And that's the fun part. You can tailor the cards in this type of design to be whatever you want your win condition to be. And I'll show you as I go. So let's first talk about Karazikar the Eyeball. And I know this pisses off some D&D diehard fans when I call this the Eyeball, the Meatball, the Cacodemon from Doom. I'm sorry, I'm not a D&D fan, but I am a Doom fan, so this will always be a Cacodemon to me, or a Pain Elemental, whatever you want. But I love the Karazikar. This is a 5-mana Beholder. That's his creature type. He has 2 abilities here. Unfortunately, does not have flying. You would think he would. Whenever you attack a player, as in me, the controller of Karazikar, you tap target creature that player controls, and it becomes goaded. So if you attack multiple opponents, you target and tap 1 creature from each opponent you attack. The better part of this is the second half, because it is an enabling card advantage that helps and suggests to your opponents to attack each other, so they can also get card advantage. And I love reiterating this to your opponents, because it essentially becomes a free sign in blood. What it is whenever an opponent attacks someone that's not me, they will draw a card and lose a life, and I will do the same. So if they attack both of my opponents, he will draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. It's a free sign in blood. And that makes Karazikar, while he is a very passively threatening commander, because he does generate a lot of card advantage, people tend to want that card advantage for themselves. The greed usually wins in this scenario. Now let's set the Eyeball over here, and we'll talk synergy with him as we go. Like usual, I will do this by card type, kinda. When we get to specific cards, I will splinter them off into their own sections as we go, so we can talk about them later on down the video. So let's start with creatures. This is a Rakdos deck, so there's going to be a lot of awkwardly slow, not rampant growth type of mana rocks and creatures. Burnished Heart is here because there is a good amount of random, somewhat flavorfully group huggy type of reanimation effects. So a Burnished Heart that you can reanimate is good. Same thing with Solemn. These are probably the two best creatures to reanimate in this deck. Like in my Holga deck, the Camino Battle Armor, the Robo Doggo, is a personal pet favorite, but this also combines really well with a Bothersome Quasite. There's not a very large amount of goad in this deck, even though the commander has that ability on him, but there's a few assisting cards, and that is a good way to help people get more attacks, because goad's failure is the lack of card advantage. And Karazikar kind of solves that. Although you rarely do want to put him into play super early, because he is a larger body and that may make people want to remove him. Zoncha was an old commander for this deck. I love Zoncha. I've had her in her own dedicated decks. Love dropping her activated ability and getting people to really want to activate her. She's another infinite mana Rakdos commander, which is unfortunately becoming just common and boring. But I love Zoncha, and it is a very good way to create dialogue in your games when you ask somebody if they want a 5/5. Everybody would like to have a free 5/5. You don't tell them what it is, of course, until you cast it. And that's actually the normal play pattern. We'll start the chatter here about how to play some of these cards on and off, but the normal play pattern in this style of deck is you kind of use your knowledge and you see who is accelerating faster than the others, who is maybe lagging behind. And the way that this deck has always been successful is you always help the player that's in the worst spot. So if someone's lacking creatures, someone's lacking ramp, you give it to them. And if you don't know who that is, then you can always try to go in turn order. And if someone does something to you in the earlier turns that you don't like randomly chip damage on you in attack, then you just vocally say, well, you did this to me, so I'm not going to give something to you, but the next player to your right or left, I'm going to give them this thing. Zoncha's a bad example here because that usually scares people. Kardur is probably the better type of pseudo-goat commander. This is a kind of commander where you just keep flickering Kardur and then you win with a random burn spell. He's here just for value. But this is another funny one. This ended up being, there's a few active treason variants in this deck, and this is basically a one-shot active treason that then appears to be scary tapped creature on my board that might end up getting removal bait. So far, it basically is an active treason that tends to draw you a card, and it's actually pretty good if you just ignore the fact that it's a 6/6 demon and you don't try to go for the creature body. Disciple of Bolus goes well with all of the active treason variants in this deck. Good way of drawing a bunch of cards. And Vengeful Ancestor is another early, generically okay offense to get people to start interacting with other people. Good ways of getting extra cards off of Karazikar if you can't get through to somebody is to directly goad one of their dudes. Another fantastic way of creating dialogue in the game. Again, this deck survives not based on having powerful cards, but based on creating a dialogue with the opponents. And I will all too frequently do something to create or enable like a dungeon or the monarchy. And I will then freely say, hey, if you want to trade the monarchy back and forth, we can. You get people to start attacking each other because you can't just say to the person that's after you that you want to trade the monarchy, because the person that's after them will want the monarchy and it'll continue going around. That's the conniving secret part of how this works. But by creating the dialogue where you are talking to the opponents is the key. And I'm going to keep saying that throughout this video because that is the underlying key to this deck's success, is creating some sort of atmosphere where the opponents are talking. You are the friendly person giving them stuff, and they get benefits from attacking, not you. Author of Shadows is a generic value card. Again, this deck, there's a lot of holes that you can customize to do whatever you want. But this does two things. This deck has very little graveyard hate. In fact, I think he is it. But you can then get the best card. And since, and this is difficult because I do play this online, so I don't like playing Gonti effects online because I can't represent everyone else's cards easily. But usually when you tell someone to exile a card from their graveyard, they'll put it up in a corner. And this is a little bit sneaky and manipulative, but you take the best card and you have them just put it somewhere so you remember. No one else in this game online, when playing on Spell Table, is going to remember that you have someone else's card exiled on their side, even though it's on their screen. And it probably won't work if you're playing this in real life because you're taking their card, exiling it under him. But while playing online, it's not a very powerful thing to do, but it's just another sneaky way of getting a powerful card, having access to the best card in everyone's graveyard like that one time, and then just people forget it's there. But going on, this is what would probably be the first actual win condition of the deck. It is an Act of Treason, 5 mana body, 4/4 Act of Treason. But this ability right here is the key. It is, once again, another legendary Rakdos infinite mana commander. And this one bleeds each opponent for 2 life. So, how this deck ends up functioning, it has the ability to go late game by creating a lot of landfall. There's a lot of cards in here in this deck, very few actual mana rocks that tap for mana, but ways of putting lands into play. So it is, in a way, running like a mono black control deck that tries to get up to an Exsanguinate or whatever the Bolus's one is, the X black, each player sacks, discards, whatever. The new Exsanguinate card from like Our Devastation. I can't remember the name of the card. They're so generic, I just never played it. But the approach to how this deck wins and closes out the game is similar to that, where you get everyone to attack each other, everyone's life gets pretty low, but then you have an obscene amount of mana, or a large volume of mana. So something like this, Sauron, can just win you the game. You not only just cast him, but people forget. In fact, I think the last video I showed of Karazikar, the very final one, I win doing exactly this. Everyone kind of just gets scared of everyone's board presence. I use his Enter the Battlefield trigger to basically tamper with someone's board just to mess with them a little bit. But it's distracting enough that the whole turn cycle goes by and no one really notices that I have like 20, 30 mana and his ability there. So we're going to set him over here for a second because there's a win condition pile we'll talk about. Another very generic Enter the Battlefield trigger. You don't want to always kill people's creatures when you're attempting goad, when you want your opponents to attack each other. So temporarily taking them, getting some good advantage if you make copies of them. I love getting Solemn Simulacrum with this card. It's very good value. Geode Rager is another great card. There is a nice complement of cheap fetch lands in this deck, which are great to hold up with Geode Rager. What it is, first strike 4/3. More importantly, the landfall. When a land enters the play under your control, a target play, like you can target yourself. Target player, you can target yourself if you really want. You can make basically an entire opponent's team be goaded. And if you use fetch lands, you can do this at instant speed on their declare attack. I've absolutely wrecked people when they go to do something stupid with like a Craterhoof Behemoth or the new white Craterhoof Behemoth. Then they forget he's here and I have like a Terramorphic Expanse. Then I crack this and they have to attack, not me. Fun thing. Blitzwing is like Sauron. This is one of the deck's secret win conditions. A card that looks a little unassuming at times. It is essentially a damage doubler. I love Blitzwing. I am a Transformers fan, and this is my favorite character from the entire G1 show. I have a toy of him sitting up here somewhere. He's probably shown up in my videos, the toy itself representing his tank side. I love his character. He's psychotic. He's a little multi-personality type of issues. Wonder why I like him. But in this deck, it is a vulnerable 6-mana artifact creature, not always ideal to put out early. But you don't really care about his vehicle side. You're playing this because it is a damage doubler that it does target one player, and that's come back to hit me a few times because I keep forgetting. But we're going to sit him down here for a second. Now, the Death Tyrant, just like our beloved eyeball, he is another eyeball. He's a skeleton eyeball. And this isn't here for a few reasons, because the flavor is here. There's another beholder coming up. This deck tends to draw a lot of cards, and we don't have an infinite hand size enabler, so he tends to go to the graveyard. What happens here is his 6 mana, put him into play tapped from your graveyard ability, can be done at instant speed. So if you're creating a board state where your opponents are attacking one another, like a lot of attacking, and chump blocks happen, a lot of tokens are dying, and you sneak him into play before damage after blocks are declared, you can end up with an enormous zombie army because of what happens right here in his main ability. Just a very sneaky, clever way to create an army out of nowhere from your graveyard. And if you're not doing that, you still have a pretty good body to attack with. The other beholder, Death Kiss, it is so mana intensive. I've rarely used the monstrous ability on this card. He is here just as completion as the other beholder in the colors. And Rocky, old Rakdos, my favorite. I don't even know if this is my favorite Rakdos anymore because they printed 2 new Rakdoses within like 2 months. It's insane. But I do love this ability. The coin flip ability, I have a fair number of demons in here, but that's not that important. What's important is that it's chaos, and you can use the verbiage of this being out of your control as a board wipe for humorous results in your games. You can literally make it an enjoyable experience. And if you've never played this, how to do this quickly and efficiently, because some people get aggravated at the confusion of this card. It's your card. So you need to control this effect. You don't tell people to flip for you. What you want to do is you will look at the board state and everyone in their order, their turn order. And then you can take a dice. Evens is a heads, odds is a tails. And you just say evens or odds kills a creature. And you just start pointing at each creature and you keep rolling over and over and over. That's how you do it quickly. Because if you dawdle on a card like this, you very quickly make enemies. So if you are a little bit slow at the whole dice roll, if maybe you don't recognize cards from your opponent's sides easily, you might want to skip this one. But if you do it quickly and efficiently, and you point out that it's somewhat chaotic, again, check out some of my gameplay videos. Every time I've resolved this, it is a board wipe that my opponents enjoy seeing happen. That is a very unique thing to say. A board wipe that your opponents enjoy seeing happen. Yeah. So let's go on to some other cards. These 2 are unique to the deck. If you are unfamiliar with my personal deck building habits, I like to put 1 Planeswalker and recently 1 battle in every deck I play. And this is a personal thing I do for myself. I do this mainly so I have the fun sensation of wanting to protect the Planeswalker or to enjoy the new style of battle. And this deck runs Obinix, this one, because I can do a little sacrifice trick. It's almost like another Disciple Bolus, where you can, if you get him big enough, you can lose or draw some cards off of him. And this is kind of like a budget board wipe. This transforms into a card version of Marchesa, which is like a bad Phyrexian Arena. But this is mainly here just as a 6 mana situational board wipe. We have a lot of legendary creatures in this deck. Let's flip this over so you can see Marchesa so I don't have to look for the other side. Yeah, I rarely actually care about getting Marchesa off of this. It is just a bad Phyrexian Arena. The card's beautiful. I love the style of this card. But we're playing this because it is this board wipe. And again, that's a personal thing. In most of my red decks, I'm running the one where you draw and discard. Let's go on to the spells. Now, these are not in instant sorcery order. These are in card function order. So, come on, Light. There you go. Scheming Symmetry is a very great card to see early game, because you can immediately get the best card that you want for yourself and deflect the fact that you tutored by helping the person in the worst spot. By doing so, you're gaining an ally. They're getting someone who's not enjoying the game to start enjoying the game. I will frequently target the person who's not been able to ramp, someone who can't block something aggressive, someone who needs a removal spell to retaliate against someone who's already messed with them. That's what this does. but because you're getting someone into the game, they're already gonna kind of like you for what you're doing to help them. Everyone in the table is going to see that this is a friendlier atmosphere. And, by the way, you just tutored. Seize the spotlight. This is another variant of an act of treason. A card where you can possibly take someone else's creature until end of turn. Unfortunately, most people associate this in a deck that has black as a sacrifice trick. So this is almost always pay 3 mana, get 3 treasures, draw 3 cards. And that's pretty good. But of course you can do political games with this. You can ask to borrow someone's commander to do more commander damage to someone else that's already got commander on. I've used this to literally stack commander damage and kill people. I love acts of treasons. Allure of the Unknown is another secretly powerful card that just so many people skip. And it has that Seb McKinnon artwork, this beautiful artwork. I love this in the foil. Let's see if we can catch here. Oh, this isn't a foil version of the card. I have like 10 copies of this card. I love this card so much. Anyways, it's a 5 mana draw 5. In short, the 6th card is going to your opponent. Now, there's a few caveats here. This doesn't actually draw cards. So this gets around things like a Smothering Tithe, which is fantastic. And there are some hate pieces, not as many in the power level you're probably playing this, but you're revealing your cards. So you can reveal your group hug cards. More importantly, you can literally ask before you even cast the spell, if you know who you're going to target, hey, can I help you if you don't betray me? And then you're literally making an ally before they even know what they get. Because you can just explain what this card does, and they'll say, oh, I get a free card? Whatever? Okay. But this is a 5 mana draw 5, and everyone then forgets that you just drew 5 cards, because one of their other opponents is playing the best card out of the 6. It's a very manipulative way of thinking, but that is kind of the best that this deck can do. Stinging Study is another draw card. This is instant speed, 5 mana, draw 5. Instant speed, make sure you hold up to end of turn, and don't let people know you're drawing a bunch of cards at instant speed. Same thing, Blood for the Blood Gods. This card tends to randomly kill people in this deck. The 8 damage, I tend to forget that that's a part of this card, because I usually don't want to kill my allies too quickly. But there's been many a times when I need the cards, and at the cost of my allies, I have to do the 8 damage. Anyways, going on, we have a lot of reanimation, and Exhume is probably the most fun in this deck, because I can literally just start citing videos and scenarios in videos I've posted where I've used Exhume to get a player back into the game, where someone is running away with the game, and you can use Exhume to literally enable 2 of the other opponents to then be able to gang up against the one person ahead of everybody. But you are also getting something back from your own graveyard. That's the sneaky part. From the Catacombs, just like when I talked about adding the initiative, or the monarchy to the game, adding the initiative is another way of creating a dialogue. And this is a very fun one, and there's a number of these in the deck. I would always recommend that not only do you get some large form of the initiative to show people on camera, make it easier for them to read, because a lot of people don't understand it and it gets confusing. The more important thing is if you can find a way of having fun with the initiative. And I have a nice little stack of tiny little toys and tokens and trinkets, Monopoly pieces and Harry Potter hats and tiny transformers. We have some clue weapons down here. We have a wrench. This is the kind of gimmick that if you add onto this, it makes it more enjoyable for everybody. Not just you, but the people. And of course, you want to say, hey, if anyone wants to trade initiatives, let me know. You can hit me, and just let me hit you back. And that does the same thing as Monarchy, where, yeah, the person to your left is going to want the free card, or they're going to want to go through this. And then it goes in a circle. And everyone just starts attacking each other while you sit back and watch the chaos unfold. It's fantastic. But that's the half of this card. This is a reanimation spell for 5 mana. You gain the initiative, but you can also cast this from your graveyard. Incarnation Technique, it's got Demonstrate. It is essentially a mill and reanimate card that you can hit twice. Now, this is a very chaotic card in this deck specifically. I don't have a high volume of creatures. This is not a dedicated reanimator deck. We don't have Entomb or anything like that. But, again, this is the kind of card where you want to find the opponent that's in the worst position and offer just offer them a little olive branch and see what they do with it. By the way, you're reanimating 2 creatures. Tempt with Immortality. This is probably the worst of this style of card because very rarely do I have that many creatures in my graveyard. The game has gone very long if that's going on, and by the time I have a lot of creatures to reanimate, I don't have that many opponents left. So maybe gauge this card build. Yeah, gauge if you want to run this card depending on how your creature volume looks and how your opponents interact. This might be worth cutting. I just like it. I should have put the techniques next to each other. Creative Technique is like Incarnation Technique. It is essentially not a polymorph, where you exile until you can play the next card you have that's not a land. And an opponent can do the same. And you just do it twice is the key. Moving on down, we have some shenanigans. Darkness, we have a Holy Day, a fog effect in our black-red deck. This speaks volumes for... If you've never played against the fog meta, just go check out the Goldfish Boys and their most recent 2 years worth of videos. Languish is a budgetary board wipe. We have a 5-mana, 5/5 commander. So something like a Toxic Deluge or a -4/-4 Wrath, where your commander survives the Wrath. It's pretty good, and this is a budget option. If I had more money to spend in this deck, this would probably be a Toxic Deluge. But we have the obvious Disrupt Decorum and Spectacular Showdown, the 2 gold win conditions. Sometimes. I sometimes actually just like tossing these out early, or not this one. This one early when he's in play, because it will almost always draw you 6 cards. Like, that's one way of thinking about Disrupt Decorum. It doesn't matter if your opponents are only doing 2 or 3 points of damage to each other, if they're attacking with their little utility dorks. If your commander is in play, when you Disrupt Decorum and everyone has at least 2 creatures to attack, Disrupt Decorum is going to draw you 6 cards. That's gas. Spectacular Showdown is more along the lines of a win condition. We'll put it down here. Price of Progress is absolutely one of this deck's best win conditions. We'll put it down here and talk about that in a bit. Now we have the other active treason effects in this deck. Grab the Reins and Word of Seizing. There's a few other instances that I like. Instant speed ones are good because you can use them as a combat trick. If someone is attacking you with 2 creatures, you can take one of them and block the other creature. Word of Seizing can be used for anything. You can use this to take a Planeswalker, an ultimate from an opponent. You can use this to take someone's Wasteland, because it's got split second, they can't respond, or their Married Landscape. Very, very powerful cards. This one I've used in a video to fling an Ormondel for the win. Ormondel. Oh, he's in the artifacts. I'll get there. But yeah, look for the instant speed ones. They're always 2 or 3 more mana than a normal Act of Treason. Act of Aggression is one from the original New Phyrexia set. It is 3 colorless and 2 Phyrexian red, so a 5 or 3 mana and 4 life for another instant speed one. It's a very good filler. Electrodominance, basically adding 2 red mana to make any spell in your deck an instant, like an instant speed 6/6. Yeah, let's move on to these. Now we're on to some non-artifact, non-land permanents. We have Cola the Ring. This could be basically a Phyrexian arena in the deck. This is here, again, to create dialogue and chatter in the game. And what my dialogue usually goes is that I'm just trying to make the game more confusing and convoluted by adding yet another mechanic to the game. So we have things like Monarchy, we have Dungeons, we have the Ring, we have Transformers. The randomness in this deck is pretty extreme. And this is just a very quick and easy early way of doing that can generate you card advantage over the game. Gift of Doom. This card gets so many people. Every time I have been able to cast this card, I think every time I just always have a Solemn Simulacrum out to sacrifice, which is wild. But you can put this on an opponent's creature. So, but this is a little confusing. What this is a morph enchantment. So for 3 mana, you're casting this as a 3/3 face down. But what happens is, as a free cost to morph, you have to sack a creature. People cannot respond to Morph's ability. It is an effect that kind of messes with the sack a little bit. But when you morph it, it becomes an aura enchanting a creature. Any creature you want, yours or your opponent's, and it becomes indestructible and has death touch. Now, sacrificing a creature in this deck is a little rough. We don't have a lot, but this can become a crazy good combat trick, a way of saving a creature from removal, making an opponent's... If someone's like worried about one of your opponents killing them with Voltron and they board wipe, you can snap this onto that commander to save it. This has so much potential, especially when you start thinking about putting it on your opponent's creatures. Let's go on. That last one here is another win condition. We're going to keep stacking the win conditions down here and talk about them in a second. It's Fire Emancipation. Next, we have artifacts. As I mentioned earlier in the video, this deck is tailored to have very few physical mana rocks in play. Mana rocks tend to get blown up, but lands don't, not so much. So putting effects that put lands into play is better. Wayfarer's Bauble is just that. I can't pronounce this card. Thaumatic Compass turns into a land. This is great early game to help get a few extra lands if you don't have a card advantage piece yet. Hithlian Rope is another type of... this never works as the group hug card that you think it would. You have to be careful when playing this online, because the way the screen is facing, the person to your left is technically on the right of the screen. And it's always going to go to the person to your right, which means the person to your left. I don't even know how to say this correctly. In short, just make sure you always hand this to the person to your right. And if you're playing on a digital screen, the person to your right is the person who played before you, not the person whose turn is after you. But what this does, for 2 mana, it has 2 activated abilities. Can't be sacrificed as a static ability there. 1 mana tap, search your deck for a land, put into play tapped. 2 mana tap, draw a card. Then the person whose turn was before yours gains control of this. It's still tapped. I treat this specifically as a 3 mana rampant growth. I might say, man, I might need that card, but I think I'm going to go for the land. I am playing this card always to get the land. And hopefully it will go around the turn, like the table at least once per the entire game, but most of the time in most games this comes out, I will give it to the player to my right. They will forget it's there. They will try to sacrifice it. They will do something to get rid of it. It will just blow up randomly. But this is 3 mana rampant growth, but you are advertising that you are giving away a gift. Marin Safe House. Again, I said we have a bunch of cheap fetch lands in our deck. This is here just to become another 3 mana rampant growth. This could be used off of any opponent's fetch land. If there's just a normal land in a graveyard, it taps for mana. This is a very underrated card in non-green decks, because it literally can become a Cabal Coffers randomly. Like, there's a lot of things this card can do. But in our deck specifically, we treat this as a 3 mana rampant growth. Pendant of Prosperity. One card that I kind of miss having in this deck was Frenzied Fugue. It was a red enchantment. There you enchant a permanent, and you and the owner of that permanent basically share it. And I used to love playing Pendant of Prosperity, giving this to an opponent, and then you enchant Pendant of Prosperity with that enchantment. So on your turn, you would gain control of the pendant, and if you activated this ability, you got to do the ability twice. And drawing 2 and playing 2 extra lands, it doesn't seem too good. But when you consider your color identity, the restriction of mana ramp in terms of lands of what this color can do, and the outcome, like the net goal of this deck, it's actually very powerful. Realm Breaker, there's no Phyrexians in this deck. This is here just to get more lands into play. Navigation Orb is essentially a 5 mana Cultivate or Kadama's Reach. Rarely would anybody actually want to play this. This is the kind of passive, unassuming card that when a deck plays, like, it gets you into the late game. We have, of course, a Soul Ring. Sarvek's Tomb is more ways of getting the Undersea, bringing the initiative into play, and this tends to tap for 2 mana. Coveted Jewel. This card speaks volumes. If you know what this card does, I don't even have to explain how this card works. This is exactly like trading initiative, trading monarchy. Everyone wants this effect, and especially when you say you're willing to give it away without blocking. Because it will always end up going around the table, and yes, people are drawing cards. But in order for them to draw cards, everybody's life total has to drop, and that is the key. We have 3 swords: Sword of the Animus, Bitter Thorn, and Sword of Hearthenholm. These are like the default 3 equipments for any non-green deck in lower power tables that has any number of cheaper creatures that can attack, because they ramp us. And getting 1 or 2 of these into play, fantastic. Every game that you see one of these early and it survives for a turn or 2, you're always going to be ahead. Bloodthirsty Blade is just another fun goad mechanic. You can always ask, hey, can I make your creature bigger? Elbrus the Binding Blade is a unique card. This is kind of a funny card that I'm just playing to enjoy, and I'll stick it with the win conditions because it's an easily exchangeable card. Wishclaw Talisman is exactly what you would expect to be in this deck. This is the sort of card that you give to the opponent who's the furthest behind. You don't want to make the deal that if you give it to an opponent, they have to give it back to you, because that means the other 2 opponents are going to try to destroy this, or they'll gang up against you, or something like that. You just want to suggest that you are going to use this, and then you ask the table who is furthest behind, or who needs a board wipe, or who has access to a card that can answer a threat, because you are just like Seize the 1 mana tutor. You are using this to tutor whatever you want, but then you are giving this to an opponent. They will spend their mana, and they will use the tutor to get the answer that the table wants. Yeah, it's a diversion tactic. Cursed Mirror is essentially a 3 mana clone. You hold this up to be an enter the battlefield trigger of some effect, like cloning Solemn Simulacrums. We have these 2 wands, and this is Mirage Mirror. These are more shenanigans cards than actual like group hug cards. These are the cards you want to hold on to until you have mana to activate them. This is in German, sorry. This is 3 mana for an artifact. I'm losing my voice. This is 3 mana for an artifact that has a 2 mana activated ability. It can become a copy of target artifact, enchantment, creature, or land until end of turn. And you can stack this ability multiple times, so it goes through phases if you need to do some sort of stack trick. Rarely do you have to do that, but if there's like a global destroy all artifacts thing coming, you can turn this into a land. This can be a surprise chump blocker. Lots of shenanigans here. And these 2, again, don't play these if you don't have the mana to actively use them immediately. 4 mana, 3 mana, 4 mana to activate both. So 8 mana, 7 mana. Because if you're playing these out and you don't have the mana to activate them, they're just going to get blown up, and then you've lost your card for no value. But let's go through the lands. This will take just about 2 seconds, because as you saw, one of the win conditions in this deck is a price of progress. We have fetch lands, very cheap fetch lands, and these are all designed to put basic lands into play. There's 5 of these, and the rest of my lands are all basic. Every one of them. They're my old Urza ones. So there is, I think, 38, 37 or 38 lands total. And this is a very budget thing to do, but if you're using Price of Progress as a win condition, it pays off. Like, I know in the most recent era, I'm showing my age, and my tendency to play Price of Progress has been, it's just a card I've always played on and off in my mono red decks. And I know in the most recent, like 5, 6, 10 years, the number of non-basic lands in EDH has just dramatically increased. They're more powerful, and by using Price of Progress as a win condition, you are losing the utility the non-basic lands offer you. You're not being able to play all the MDFCs, for example, or the Kamigawa legendary lands. But now let's take a peek at these cards real quick. There's 6. These are the cards I would consider to be the actual ways that this deck wins with. And they're not exactly, like, necessary, really. Like, if you think about how this deck functions, a lot of the shenanigans make the opponents end up killing themselves. And then they get very low life. And then you can use, like, a random burn spell to just murder somebody. If you happen to have Karazikar and an equipment that gives him +2 power, for example, then Fury Emancipation becomes a one-shot kill. Like, that's 7 commander damage tripled to 21. And Elbrus the Binding Blade, this is just a goofy card. It's just like Blitzwing. I'm playing with these because I wanted to see them win, and I've done this a few times. There's a video, I think, where I kill someone with Wingar, and then on the next turn, he's like a 26-26, and I fling him at somebody else. I can't remember the game. I think there was just a Sath player. But yeah, these cards, there's no real explanation behind them, and this is kind of where you can tailor the deck to be whatever you want it to be. Like, you can change the win conditions to be a new card that you want to play with, a childhood favorite card like what I'm doing here, and that's kind of the best part of this style of Chaos deck. Because it's customizable, and because you're outside of the green-white color identity, and people see that you're playing genuine group hug cards, no one's going to guess how you're actually going to close out the game. Now, with that all being said, I would highly recommend that not only do you try to consider some sort of group hug deck, but try to do it outside of the normal colors that people expect group hug, because that's when it gets really fun. You can start building a group hug style deck with any commander, really, because there's colorless cards in all color identities that have these type of sneaky manipulative effects. I love black-red. It's my personal preference. The Eyeball, he's fantastic. He plays exactly how I want the deck to play. But this is the style of deck that I think everyone should have some experience playing. And more importantly, yeah, just stop trying to gain 7 life and, yeah. It's such a cliche win condition that most people see group hug, like green, white, X, whatever, and then they think they know, the opponents all know what's happening. And then as soon as it happens, everyone's eyes just roll. So my suggestion is always to try something a little bit more unique, find something different. This deck, literally, I could change these 6 cards to be any win condition, and the deck would play exactly the same until I am in a pivoted position to win the game. And again, I know I'm also stabbing myself in the foot by saying this. I do track my win-loss ratio. My goal online is to always have about a 25% win rate in a 4-player pod. 25% win rate means everybody came in to that pod with a roughly equal powered deck, and everyone had a same chance to win the game. And that's my goal. But the unique factor here being that it is an awkwardly colored group hug deck that throws people off by being genuine group hug at times and then having unexpected win conditions. This deck has the highest win rate out of all of my decks. And as you're seeing, the cards I'm playing, I'm not playing powerful cards. Like, I'm just playing generic value pieces until the time is right. And that's kind of a combination of experience and being able to recognize and identify threats at the table. Because if you can correctly identify who the actual threat is, and then drive the other 2 opponents towards that threat, or actually enable them because you're giving them cards, or some sort of advantage to do so, that kind of balances out power issues in the table. But more importantly, people trust you. Maybe don't trust the Rakdos player. I don't know. But yeah, I have a feeling I'm stabbing myself in the foot by saying this, and now I'm going to lose every game I play this in. We'll see. But yeah, I have been offline for the past few weeks for sad reasons. I'm recovering emotionally from some stuff. Some of my viewers of the channel know I don't want to talk too much about this, but I'm sinking into work and doing a bunch of overtime. I'm kind of trying to lose myself there. So when I have the social energy, I'm trying to record again, and I have a few videos I can find time to edit, to post. So I'll hopefully be getting back into some kind of rhythm. I was doing a weekly video. Every Friday I was having a new gameplay. My lack of a consistent play group is making it difficult for me to get good games. It's like 1 out of every 8 games I record is actually worthy of being posted online. Because they're like moxfield, or not moxfield, playing on spell table, it's rampant cheaters. There's a massive issue with not just technical issues, like someone could have a really shitty connection, a cheap camera, bad audio. But someone could literally be a mouth breather talking into their microphone, or like giving ASMR of them eating cereal, or wearing a headset to the bathroom, or hearing their children or their family yelling in the background. Not everyone can have a private room like I have to play games, and some people have to play in their kitchen table, for example, and there's families. It's uncontrollable. But also there are toxic players, cheaters, people who just want to win the game, so they bring a high-power deck into a low-power queue. I'm complaining again. In short, it is difficult for me to find quality footage to share online. I think a rough average after me doing some math was 1 out of 8 games was actually good enough to show online. And I'm going to post, I have an Excel video. I really shouldn't post it, because one of the players on the bottom right corner, his webcam quality is questionable throughout the entire thing. And I know that's going to make some people just immediately hate the video, but the actual gameplay was fantastic. So again, I'm posting those mainly for myself to preserve memories. I was posting games for my partner to kind of reminisce of a previous life we used to have. I don't know if I'm going to be able to continue doing that. We'll see. Changing topics. If you like this video, what I'm talking about here, if you have any experience with group hug, feel free to share. Please do. Always like the video if you liked it, and if you want to support me and my channel, check out the links down below. Cheers.